want to do a few things here. I want to do everything. I want to do all the things. List of historical. Ooh, I got some places picked out already. What do you know? They must seem to think it's important. After all, it's got pictures. It's on the registry. Not just any pictures either. Why, just look at this. They got a picture of this mirror. Yep. Which they go out of the way to say that it came from around the Horn. So this is a pre-Panama Canal mirror. How about that? How about that? Brought it all the way from around the Horn. And here as well, the marble mantle, with our two favorite mysterious orbs that may or may not contain a fluid. And this very Baphomet-looking fruit bouquet just happens to have two round fruits and a grape cluster and these little horns here. I don't know. Symmetry? Possibly. But also possibly other things. God, I want to draw on his face so bad. Look at these big and have eyebrows. Well, now you've seen it. Now I've done my due diligence and shown you the house and the mantle and the fireplace. The Allen Summer Gauge. Parlor, I'm sorry. Parlor. I'm sorry. I'm not used to that still. And that's it. That's all there is, folks. That's the end of the museum. Go home. Butte County is primarily Chico metropolitan area. From my admittedly limited understanding, what do I do know of it? Well, it's one of those magical places that, though they had the crazy fires in Paradise, 2008 and 2018, and the entire county population decreased by 4%. See here, got the numbers right here. See here on the Scriptopedia. 9,000 people less from 2010 to 2020, and we're told the majority of those left from 2018 to 20. But still, it's one of those magical places that when it came time to vote, 12,000 new people showed up out of nowhere. 12,000 more voted in the last election, even though the population is 9,000 less. Isn't that a magical number anomaly? What am I trying to say? I'm just trying to say that Butte County is magical. Just like all the other counties that did the same thing. Magic! People from nowhere! I love America. Let's talk about democracy. Let's talk about the Bidwell Mansion. And this is no laughing matter. This mansion is one for the ages. There's a town named after this gentleman, as well as a mansion. And wait till you hear his story. It's teeming with all the California uber ridiculousness that you've come to expect. Many of the states have an entrenched history that can kind of get swallowed up in time, such as Europe does, where it's like, oh, it was 16th century, it was 1700, blah, blah, blah. The dates are so far back in time, it's really hard to get a grip on what's true and what's not. California doesn't have that problem. But you see, they do have a problem. Their history jammed it all into 50 years, and it don't make no damn sense. To me, no. Who am I? Nobody. So this is a 4-story tower structure with a partial basement. Pretty ridiculous for a man with no children. I don't think he got married until he was 50. Now, of course, Mr. Henry Clearland of San Francisco, the man that despite 22-plus episodes of California architecture I've never heard of, yet I'm told he is prominent. Whoever this Mr. Clearland is that showed up out of nowhere. The walls and the interior walls are of fired brick. True that. The foundation is a full running brick foundation 3 feet wide. 3 feet wide. While the molding and the trim are of redwood. There are 12-foot high ceilings in all the rooms on the first and second floors. Each room has an Italian marble fireplace, evidently designed for small pieces of wood, or no wood. Now, their influence on the social, cultural, economic, and political events of the day are not to be understated. As a matter of fact, Mr. Bidwell has a rather dubious backstory, which I will gladly get into for you. So this house was built between 65 and 1868. Oh, and here he's given his name as H.W. Cleveland. Well, which is it, Clearland or Cleveland? Clearly, someone is confused. We are taught that here, Mrs. Bidwell taught the Indian women and children to sew clothing. Right, because I didn't know. The women didn't know how to sew clothing until, luckily, she showed up. Thank God for you, Annie Kennedy. This tells us, by the way, if you ever happen to be near there, that the pipes, although they work, they're lead, and water should not be drunk. There's scotch for that instead. Mr. Bidwell himself maintained a paternalistic regard for the Indians living on and in the vicinity of his large estate. Why, he alone represents almost a unique chapter in California American-Indian relations. Don't get me wrong, they definitely benefited from their labor, but he protected and defended their interests, as long as they were aligned with his, seems like. Annie Bidwell did what usually these young wives of millionaires did in that era. Started a school. And of course it was transferred upon her death to the state of California, like all good deep state actors. But I'm getting ahead of myself. And here's what she looks like today. Well, not Annie, but the house. I guess Annie could look like that too. I don't know. Mr. John Bidwell. This guy. What? So Mr. Don Juan Bidwell was born in New York. At the age of 22, moves to California as part of the Bartleson-Bidwell Party, which is one of the first expeditions of American immigrants. So not only does he start teaching before the age of 22 in Westport, Missouri, he also purchased a farm in the area and became the principal. That's right, the principal of the school at age 20. At age 21, he took a holiday in St. Louis. When he returned home, he discovered that the local gunman had stolen his farm. Since the man who stole it was known for ass-kickery, none of the authorities were willing to reinforce his land rights. So Mr. Bidwell decided to leave Westport. He had established the Western Immigration Society and published news somehow that he intended to take a large wagon train to California. The idea was very popular, and soon the society had the names of 500 people who wanted to take part in this momentous event. Shopkeepers, fearing a rapid decline in customers, he was taking so many people, decided to mount a campaign against the idea. Local newspapers had a war. A great deal of publicity was given to Thomas Farnhane's Travels in the Great Western Prairies, which described in detail the hardships people would face. As a result of this campaign, only about 100 people turned up to leave. Age 22, his first ever wagon train. But not his first ever farm or school that he ran or publication or society. But the first wagon train, that's cool, right? And the first wagon train in general, going from Missouri River to California. There was only 5 women. 5 women. Play nice, boys. It also included several talented individuals, and 4 of them all eventually became millionaires. And yes, Mr. Bidwell was one of them. He admitted that the party included no one who had ever been to California. He says, "Our ignorance of the route was complete. We knew that California lay west. That was the extent of our knowledge." Well, with that logic, you can just go to Hawaii as well. So when Bidwell heard a group of missionaries led by Pierre-Jean Desmain, it was decided to wait until they arrived. It was well we waited for Fitzpatrick, for otherwise probably no one of us would ever reach California because of our inexperience. Yeah, well, even with Fitzpatrick, they ran out of food, and all the wagons had to be abandoned. And by October, they had killed the last of their oxen. Of the 69 people, well, I thought it was 100, who set out, only 32 made it alive. So yeah, like a third of them. But who cares, guys? They made it! And apparently, those odds were so good that it inspired thousands more. Now, once in California, he immediately happens to fall in with Mr. Sutter of, Sutter's Mill. He also managed to serve in the war with Mexico and got the rank of major, and then returned to Sutter's employment. He also met a man named Marshall, who happened to be the first person to discover gold to kick the whole thing off. So Mr. Bidwell prospected for a time, and actually discovered gold himself on the Feather River, at a place known as Bidwell's Bar. However, Mr. Bidwell cared little for mining and directed his attention towards agriculture, somehow acquiring 20,000 acres of land, known as Rancho Chico, and decided, I guess this will be my permanent home, and became one of the most noted agriculturists in the state. Oh, but that's not all. Why, that same year he was elected to the Senate of the first legislature of California. 1850, he was a delegate to the National Democratic Convention at Charleston, a strong defender of the Union, switched parties, and was appointed general in command of the 5th Brigade California Militia by Governor Leland Stanford, and served until the close of the Civil War. Then he was a delegate to the Baltimore National Convention, which renominated Abraham Lincoln to the presidency. He was also nominated and elected to the U.S. Congress as one of California's representatives. He made a bid for the governorship later, and actually ran for president later at age 74. At the age of 49, he married Annie Kennedy, daughter of Joseph Camp Elliott Kennedy, a noted statistician and superintendent of the census of 1850, where he happened to meet her father. He was also a grandson of Samuel Kennedy, which was a surgeon in the Revolutionary War, and of Andrew L. Elcott, surveyor of the 10-mile square ceded by Maryland and Virginia, which became D.C., at which point Annie becomes a leader for women's suffrage, prohibition, Indian women welfare, etc., etc. And this house that I struggling to get closer to was where they hobnobbed with the rest of the elite. And as far as Bidwell's Bend or Bar or whatever it's called, it's now at the bottom of Oroville Lake, which is even more suspicious. Not bad for a guy who wandered here from New York, if you can believe any of it, which I can't. Oh, I forgot to mention he was also a Freemason. Oh yeah, I also forgot to mention that when they got married, some of the guests were President Andrew Johnson and Ulysses S. Grant. Oh, I forgot to mention also when they had parties at the mansion, they had people like President Rutherford B. Hayes, William T. Sherman, Susan B. Anthony, Francis Willard, Governor Leland Stanford, John Muir, Joseph Dalton Hooker, that kind of people. Nothing to see here, Bidwell. And really, it's all starting to look like such a hoax. But we'll get into that later. Because right now we're looking at the Hazel Hotel, y'all, and I'm struggling to find something nice to say. You look good. Have you been working out? Well, the survey had no problem finding nice things to say. In fact, this is actually called the Leland House. I wonder who it could be named after. Leland. Where have I heard of a Leland before? Oh, yeah. Mr. Stanford. The guy's named after fucking every single thing in California, pretty much. And it was constructed in 1888, of course. Now, usually the material consists predominantly of unpainted brick, which is interrupted by regularly spaced arch-tipped 2/2 vertical double-hung wood sash windows, as you can tell. And the history goes, it's an excellent example of, early masonry, something. The city of Gridley, in fact, owes its existence to the introduction of the railroad in the late 19th century, and this hotel is the sole remaining direct link to the railroad era. Frickin' railroad gets all the glory. And by 1854, the Gridley Herald happened to write that Gridley was a handsome, thriving community with 2 good hotels, but Gridley needs a large brick hotel, rather specific. And it was precisely this need that led to the construction of the Hazel Hotel's only surviving link to its earliest historical roots. Imagine that. 22 rooms, unless you count the parlors. And it's called the Leland House, because he's the guy whose D we had to S in order to get the railroad to come here. Don't tell Jane. She'd be pissed. And I don't want this to be, you think this is supposed to be some definitive list of all the properties, simply the ones that stand out to me, whether for some detail in the story or some look, or I don't remember it from the survey, because they're 2 different things. But this Carnegie Library was built in 1912 by Henry William Weeks. The same Weeks from Weeks and Day, I believe. But I can't be certain. Neither can you. We're told about the Greek Revival style, and it's, of course, one of the 1,600 public library buildings that Andrew Carnegie provided funding for, allegedly. And this is one of the 36 temple-style classic revival California Carnegies, completed between 1903 and 1915, and one of the 18 still standing today. The other 18 have vanished in time, or they're underneath a lake, or the earth swallowed them up, or they were raptured away, or they were bulldozed for a parking lot. Hell, I don't know. Mr. William Henry Weeks, whichever it is, depending on which one you read, designed 22 Carnegies. Imagine that. And 18 of them are still standing. Only 6 are on the National Register of Historic Places. 7 of his temple-style buildings are gone. California. Only putting a handful of these on the historic list. The rest of them, they fend for themselves out there. We don't got the money. Pelosi's gotta get her hair done. No, not Nancy. Paul. He's duh. And these pictures don't make it look very glorious. And maybe it's not. It looks like it's block. This almost looks like it was made later. Oh, well then you got that windows. So, hell, I don't know. Hell, you don't know either. It says it's made of poured concrete, but that doesn't look like concrete to me. That looks like blocks. I know. I used to play with them when I was a young lad. And look at all the windows. Just still gloriously intact. You see Pennsylvania? You can do it. Look at that. All of them. Unbroken. It's astounding, isn't it? What you can do when you put your mind to it. Will someone please tell Pennsylvania to check this out? Look at that. God. And yeah, it looks like it's sinking into the ground slowly. If that were my house, I'd be freaking out. Now, there are plenty of historical districts that are... I'd like to do a little walkthrough of some of those. A lot of these are not digitized, and some of these we've seen before. But it's worth taking a gander at these old-style pictures and see if anything new pops out. Mr. Bidwell also went on, by the way, to found the city of Chico. That's right, and I've been there once. And I read a story about a lady who was talking about there was a nice fountain that was there. She's the oldest lady that still lives in the era. And she said there was a lovely fountain, a monument, and one day, it was just gone. Someone came and took it. And, of course, she's just an old lady. No one's listening to her. But I'm listening, and I'm seeing the patterns. And I know what's going on here. This is the Stansbury House. A real looker. Excellent job, too, to let the tree move rapidly between you and the shot. They do that sometimes. You gotta be quick. Those trees. This house was built in 1882 with A.J. Bryan as the architect. It's funny because it says it's located on the corner of 5th and Salem Streets, but then that's crossed out as if it's no longer on the corner there, so I don't know. You figure it out. Surrounded by gardens, and the decorative wrought ironwork was shipped from England around the horn. They love that. The original wallpaper was obtained from San Francisco, and the gold leaf moldings, and the oak floors, which are inlaid with mahogany, and there used to be an iron figure which held a gas lamp, but alas, like the fountain downtown, someone ganked it. Probably the finest residence of the Victorian era in Chico, built by Dr. Oscar Stansbury. His daughter continues to occupy the house. His daughter, huh? In which she was born and reared. She attended the local schools. She graduated from the Chico Normal School, which became California State University. She attended the University of California in Art. She's taught several generations of people in her high school art classes. And her father, well, he received a doctorate of medicine from the University of Maryland, but returned to Mississippi with his father, visited California, decided to stay, and stayed there until he died. His instruments are donated to the Smithsonian. He was a member of the Order of Cincinnati, which his great-grandfather, Reuben Gilder, was a founder, and whose charter, signed by Washington, is now in the Order's Museum in D.C. And there you have it. The beauty that is the Stansbury House. And another odd mantel. Apparently tiny logs fit in there. And today she's quite pretty. There she is. Original furnishings intact. Food still on the table. That bread. Can't believe they've left it out all this time. It'll make you sick, I say. And look, there's Dr. Stansbury himself. You're looking fit, old chap. That's a damn pretty house. Just look at that thing. Chico Midtown Station. Look at this behemoth. And what have we here? Don't look, you pervert. I know you want to. That's Billy. He gets a little handsy with the librarians. And we're told that this giant has a basement of reinforced concrete, and everything else is made of granite, consistent with other buildings designed during Oscar Wenderoth's reign as supervising architect. The basement's only partially finished. Of course. And it houses mainly the structure's mechanical equipment, to be expected. It would be reasonable to assume that the siting of the post office had a positive effect on the town's northward development. Now it's not even the main post office. Now it's like only second post office. Now this here's the main post office in Oroville. Old World AF. Just look at that. Unbelievable. And very necessary. Look, it looks like giant pinball machines. And so overall, what have we got? The Gage House. This one's not digitized, but it's the Chapman House, the Durham House. This is the Oroville Carnegie Library today. This is that Chinese temple that me and my Serpenti went shopping for my nephew in the survey. And if you didn't watch that one, well, then that was a confusing thing I just said. Little glimpse of the historical district. Patrick Ranch House. This is the part of the South Campus neighborhood we'll do a walk through another time. And of course, given to a frat house like they always do, so they can sully it, no doubt. There's the train depot at the time. Good old St. John's. And here's what that Midtown station looks like today. You know, and they had this sort of roof to it. It really kind of blends in and modernizes it a lot. You picture this without that roof, that glazed tile roof, just flat. And you see how these modern buildings, same here, how they kind of blend in, just adding the roof. But I see you. I know what's going on here. Now, there is one more goofy thing that I saw in here. And I know it's Scriptopedia, and I know it's can't believe anything you see on here. But we go here just for the official narrative, you know. What is this? And why isn't this on the survey? See, this is what I'm talking about. What is this? It's part of Chico Hall, so even in the National Register of Historic Places, you don't get this. That's ridiculous. Unbelievable. Put some tiles on it to hide that dome. Good God. You know, it looks nothing like its former glory, and it's still amazing. Absolutely breathtaking. That wasn't even what I was going to show you. And maybe you know about this. And I thought it was cool. It went from cool to stupid in just moments. So this here, Mother Orange Tree, is the oldest living orange tree in Northern California, we're told. We're told it was purchased by Judge Lewis and planted by Clark. Got that? Lewis and Clark. Yeah. As the years passed and the tree flourished, growing to a height of over 60 feet, on average, it would yield about 600 pounds of oranges. Let me see this guy. How big is 60 feet? The fuck is that? This is the Mother Orange Tree, huh? 60 feet, huh? I mean, this is a 6-foot fence. I'm no mathematician, but 600 pounds of oranges growing here, huh? Bullshit. Now they say that this tree's been transplanted twice, and at one point it stopped producing fruit. Decayed, fungus hollowed it out. To ensure preservation, they cloned it. And 3 clones were brought for planting, and then it resumed fruit production. So really, it hasn't resumed fruit production. It's a different friggin' tree. It died, and you cloned it, and you're still calling it the mother. You know, you elite bastards wish you could do this to yourselves and still be the same person, but guess what? You can't. Can't create no soul, man. You got no soul, and you can't create it. And I'll see you on that controversial note.